Today we're going to go over the easiest and most effective way to process audio in Final Cut Pro. Now, this video is specifically for dialogue and voice, but this process can honestly make any microphone sound better, and it's a great starting point for you to build off of as you learn more about audio. Now, as I've said before, audio is a very, very important part to a great video. You can have the most beautiful shots or be sharing really useful information, but if your audio sounds like it's coming from a trash can, then it will ruin your video and no one will care about how you actually burn more calories sleeping than you do watching television. So there's two steps that we need to cover in this video, along with some bonus steps that I like to use to get the best sound out of any mic in any situation that I'm in, like in the back of a car talking into a shotgun mic like it's a news microphone, next to a roaring highway on top of a parking garage. Now, one of these steps is specific to Final Cut Pro, but you can basically use all these steps in any audio processing software that you can imagine. So for my YouTube videos, when I'm here in the office, I like using the Rode Pod mic, but this process can pretty much be used for any microphone in any situation. For example, I use this for lav mics, for my shotgun mic behind me, as well as this mic right here. It's pretty much a universal process that can be used on any microphone. So all of the steps are going to be the exact same no matter what, but all of the settings within each step are going to differentiate depending on the voice, the mic, or the situation. Okay, so we're here in Final Cut Pro 10, and what I like to do is I like to find the audio that I'm going to be using, which is this first clip here of me next to the highway. And really the first step is specific to Final Cut Pro, but this step is pretty much universal, and that's removing any unwanted noise. Final Cut Pro has this amazing tool called voice isolation. So I think other audio softwares have something similar to this, but the reason why I use voice isolation over like generic noise removal is because voice isolation can do all of what noise removal does, which is removing the noise, but it preserves, I would say, like 80% of your vocal quality, whereas most noise removers actually ruin the quality of your voice. I find that voice isolation is a great balance in between removing noise while preserving vocal quality. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the audio where I'm here on top of the parking garage next to that highway. Okay, here's an audio test in a really, really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. I mean, there's a lot of sound in the background, there's a lot of noise. So you can hear a little bit of those cars in the background. So what we'll do is we'll click on the audio file that we're gonna wanna edit, and then we'll go over to the effects panel and we'll click on voice isolation. And since this is kind of a really noisy environment, I wanna drag this all the way to around 45%, so almost halfway. Okay, here's an audio test in a really, really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. I mean, there's a lot of sound in the background, there's a lot of noise. So that's the beauty of voice isolation. It removed most of that car noise sound from the highway, but it preserved most of the quality of my voice. Now, you can crank this thing up all the way to 100%, and let's see what that sounds like. Talking through a shotgun mic, I mean, there's a lot of sound in the background, there's a lot of noise. Talking through a shotgun mic, I mean, there's a lot of sound in the background, there's a lot of noise. Now, that's really useful because if you're in a really noisy situation, chances are voice isolation is going to do the trick. But remember, the more you use voice isolation, the more you're going to sacrifice the vocal quality of the audio file. So now we can move on to the next step, which is EQ, or equalization. Now, I'm not an audio engineer, but regardless, EQ is short for equalization. And what it is essentially is a visualization of your voice on a frequency spectrum, where the lowest parts of your voice are at the beginning of the spectrum and the highest parts of your voice are at the end of the spectrum. EQ allows you to adjust those different frequencies to get the best sound. So what I'll do is I'll add a channel EQ. I'll drag it over to the audio file. So then you'll see the channel EQ effect in the effects panel. You're going to click on this right here and it will bring up the EQ window. And then also make sure to select Analyzer. And what this does, it allows you to see your voice as it's playing so you can fine tune it even more. So let's go ahead and listen to the audio so that we can see what it looks like on the EQ. Okay, here's an audio test in a really, really bad... Now, I'm not going to get too technical on all the frequencies of an EQ, but essentially the beginning of the EQ from 20 Hertz to around 200 Hertz is the lower parts of your voice. From 200 Hertz to around 2000 Hertz is like the mid range of your voice. And from 2000 Hertz all the way to 20,000 Hertz is more of the high frequencies of your voice. Now, you can break this down even further because there's a lot more different sections, but for now, this is all we really need to know. So what I do is I like adding a frequency band right before 100 Hertz. Anything before 100 Hertz in the human voice is kind of unnecessary, and that's not where our voice resides. So I'll drag it to where it's right before 100 Hertz, and then I'll take another frequency band and I'll go around to where 500 Hertz is. This is the more nasally section of your voice, and bringing down this section can actually bring more presence to your voice and make it sound a lot better. So I'll drag right here around 500 Hertz down about 7 decibels, and let's listen to the before and after. So hopefully Future Will is fixing this in post-production. So I'll actually take that a step further and go down to the number right here where it says 0.60. And what this does is it allows you to change the width of this frequency band. So I'll bring it to around 0.30. And that way it's a more gradual slope and it removes most of those middle frequencies. So now anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 to even 5,000 hertz can be a real nasally section, but it also can bring more presence to your voice. And depending on your voice, you're going to want to either raise this section or lower this section. So I'll take a slider right here in between 1,000 and 2,000, and we'll just raise it up to hear what it sounds like. Okay, here's an audio test in a really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. It kind of sounds like I'm talking through like a tin can. So I don't really like this part of my voice. So what I'll do is I'll do the same thing as I did to 500, and I'll kind of make it a little bit smaller of a band. And already before and after, listen to how that sounds. So hopefully Future Will is fixing this in post-production. Hopefully he is. If he's not, then I'm just going to scratch all of this. Okay, now the last step is I want to bring up a little bit more clarity in my voice. So this little band right here, it almost looks like a fork. What I'll do is I'll grab it and I'll go to around 5,000 and I'll bring it up around 4 decibels. And already before and after, just adding an EQ added so much clarity and presence to my voice, and it sounds so much better than it did before. So hopefully Future Will is fixing this in post-production. Hopefully he is. If he's not, then I'm just going to scratch all of this all together, and I wasted all of my time driving out here to film this funny portion to entertain you guys. Now keep in mind, this is not perfect and this is not, scientific. This is just based off hearing my voice specifically. But generally, if you just remove anything before 100 hertz, bring down the middle around 500 hertz, and then bring up between 5,000 to 2,000, your voice is going to sound so much better. Okay, so now let's move on to the next step, which is a compressor. We'll drag it over to the audio file, and you'll see it in the effects window. So essentially what a compressor is it takes the highest parts of your voice and the lowest parts of your voice and kind of brings them together to give you a more even sound. A compressor can make your audio sound so much better if used properly, and it can keep it sounding consistent. And essentially the only 3 things that I like to worry about are the threshold, the ratio, and the makeup. A threshold essentially sets the lowest level of your audio that it's going to compress. So what you can do is you can play through your audio. Okay, here's an audio test and you can look over at this meter right here, and this kind of shows you where your audio is peaking. So after looking at this meter, we can see my voice is kind of at its lowest point in between, let's say 25 to 30. So I'll just drag it over to 25, and my threshold is now set to negative 25 decibels. Now the ratio, what this does is it determines the ratio of how much gain reduction the compressor applies when the signal passes a certain threshold level. For example, a ratio of 4 to 1 means that for every 4 decibels the signal rises above the threshold, the compressor will increase the output by 1 decibel. So for me, I just use a 2.4 to 1 ratio because to me it sounds the most natural, because if you go too far, it ends up being really compressed and it sounds pretty bad. So really anywhere from a 2 to 1 or a 4 to 1 ratio will probably sound the best. So hopefully Future Will is fixing this in post-production. Hopefully he is. If he's not, then I'm just going to scratch all of this. So the last knob we're going to look at is the makeup knob. And essentially what this does, it's almost like adjusting your output gain. And what you can do is if your voice is still a little too quiet after adding the compressor, you can adjust the makeup gain to add a little bit more decibels or volume to your voice as it leaves the compressor. So you can actually, a good tip in Final Cut Pro is if you click on this audio meter right here, if you double click it, it'll bring up the audio meter in the bottom right. You can then look at your audio and see where it's peaking at, and it's peaking around -6, which honestly is really good for me, but you can bring it up a little bit more if you want to, so we'll bring it up 3 decibels. Audio test in a really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. I mean, there's a lot of, and that's honestly perfect. You don't want it to go over 0. You kind of want it to be anywhere between -5 to around -2. You don't want it to go over 0 because then it will blow out your audio and sound pretty bad. And honestly, if you just implement an EQ and a compressor, you should be good and your voice will sound so much better. But you can take it a step further by using these last 2 steps, which can fine-tune your voice even more and make it sound more professional. Okay, Future Will here, and to prevent this video from going over 30 minutes, the last 2 steps I'm going to go over really quickly because they're not essential, but they can be useful in different situations. The first one is called a noise gate, and essentially what a noise gate is it opens the gate, which allows audio to go through, or closes the gate, which stops the audio to go through below or at a certain threshold. This can be useful if there's a lot of breaths in between your voice, or there's certain situations where there's some noise in between your voice that you don't want to hear. I'm hoping this gives you guys a good example of what you want to, how your audio should be. Hopefully this sounds good. I'm hoping it is. I'm hoping this gives you guys a good example of what you want to, how your audio should be. Hopefully this sounds good. I'm hoping it is. A good example of what you want to, good example of what you want to, The second one is called a DeEsser. Essentially what that is there's these things called sibilances, which is exactly what it sounds like. Sibilances, and those are usually the S's, X's, H's in your voice. And what that does is it kind of tones those down or rounds those out just a little bit to remove the harshness of some of those S sibilance frequencies. Just to make it sound a lot better and a lot more professional. Okay, back to the video. Okay, so now I'm gonna move on to another situation, which is using this microphone right here in the office. And we're gonna run through this really quickly to show you a before and after. And you could basically use the same exact process we used before, and you can use it on this situation as well. We don't really need a voice isolation, but there's still a little bit of echo in this room, so I'm gonna add around 10 to 15%. Then we're gonna go in and we're gonna add the EQ. I also like to boost up around 200 with dynamic microphones because it can kind of boost the presence of your voice. So I'll just raise it up around 2 decibels. And then I'll lower right here in between 2,000 and 5,000 and then bring it up around 5,000 to 20,000. Okay, so this is more of an example in like a studio environment, but I literally have no soundproofing in here. Now this microphone already sounds great right out the box. Like I said in my review, if you haven't seen that already, definitely click that, it's right up here. But add just a little bit of EQ to make it a little bit more dynamic and bring a lot more clarity to my voice. Now let's add in the compressor. Taking the same steps for the compressor before, I'm gonna do the same thing with this compressor. So before and after just using that EQ and that compressor, listen to how different this sounds. Okay, so this is more of an example in like a studio environment, but I literally have no soundproofing in here, talking into a podcast microphone. So, I mean, you could find yourself in this situation, maybe filming a podcast, but you don't have the best soundproofing. And, you know, you just got you a new microphone and you want to, you know, make it sound better. And hopefully this video is helping you make your audio sound better. Hopefully this video is helping you make your audio sound better. Okay, here's an audio test in a really, really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. I mean, there's a lot of sound in the background, there's a lot of noise. So hopefully Future Will is fixing this in post-production. Hopefully he is. If he's not, then I'm just gonna scratch all of this all together, and I wasted all of my time driving out here to film this funny portion to entertain you guys. Hopefully it works good, and we're gonna see how it sounds. Okay, here's an audio test in a really, really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. Okay, here's an audio test in a really, really bad situation, talking through a shotgun mic. In my opinion, that's a pretty big difference. I'm hoping Future Will made it sound like it's a pretty big difference, but I can imagine, I got faith in him. Huge difference. Like I said, you could use all of these steps for any microphone or any voice, but the settings within each step are gonna be different depending on the mic or the voice. This is a basic starting point to get your audio to sound more professional and to make better videos. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, I gotta go home. I gotta edit this video. I gotta get it out. Oh crap, forgot the camera. Let me get the camera. Okay. Oh, almost forgot you guys. It's pretty hot, dude. It's December. What are we talking? 80 degrees right now? I was gonna wear a jacket today. It's hot. Okay, let's get you guys home. I gotta edit this video.